Hey there, I'm Tyler Esselman.
And I'm Michael Osinski.
And you are listening to...
This One Goes to 11.
Indeed, yes indeed. You're back. You made it back to This One Goes to 11. Thank you for coming back in.
Good for those of you
who... Good for you. You're a repeat customer.
Yeah.
Thank you. For those of you who are new, This One Goes to 11 is me and Michael's podcast. It's a music podcast where we just like to open up the space a little bit for a conversation about perfection. It's about us inviting someone on, and they're going to make their case and try to convince us about an album that they believe is perfect.
So perfect, in fact, that 10 out of 10, it just isn't good enough.
Nope. Not even a little bit.
Not going to cut it at all.
Even a little bit.
No.
And this has been a season of some very strong cases. And I think today we might have one of the strongest cases we've had yet. I might go so far as to say that. It's a very well-made case by who is our guest today, Michael?
Our guest today, a friend of mine, Frankie DiCiaccio, who is an actor, theater maker, educator, and social advocate. Frankie splits their time between New York City and Northern Illinois. As a director and choreographer, they infuse their work with music and dance and explore themes of fluidity, ambiguity, and unexpected connections. Outside of theater, Frankie is the operations manager of Barb Food Mart, a food pantry serving families of the DeKalb, Illinois School District. And they're also the founder of the Queer-Oriented Rural Resource Network, or QORN, QORRN, a group dedicated to helping members of the LGBTQ plus communities in rural areas access the resources they need. And I know them from the Cherubs program at the National High School Institute, a summer theater program at Northwestern University, where they are a fabulous educator, artist, and just all around pretty great person.
I would agree. And man, I thought I was busy. Jeez. Frankie keeps busy. I am impressed. I'm so impressed. And the artist and album that they brought today was challenging and was ripe with opportunities for talking about what's going on in the world. Man, what more could we have asked for, really? That's the whole reason we did this damn thing.
And also an opportunity to sort of rediscover an artist that I had really loved at one point in my life and had kind of grown out of touch with. So it was so selfishly, this was a really great episode for me.
Yeah, I think you did it. It was really big for you. Today was big.
It was big. Thanks so much, Tyler. I appreciate the validation. Yeah,
absolutely. And I had never listened to this person before. So also big for me. It was great.
So there we go. Why don't we, let's cut the chit chat, get right to the episode. Frankie DiCiaccio, welcome to This One Goes to 11. How you doing?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me. This is an absolute thrill.
Well, we are so glad to have you. I miss you. I'm going to miss you this summer. Hopefully I can see you briefly, like outside of the program, but it's all good.
Just two ships in the night, Osinski.
Just as long as you are both in Northern Illinois, that's something, right?
I mean, I've been in Northern Illinois for quite a long time at this
point.
Yeah.
Michael, who keeps coming and going.
It's true. Maybe I can draw you to the lake this summer for a brief respite. I
would love that. Do we need to explain what we're talking about?
No. Well, it's just so you know, listener. I love it when we just dive into stuff. Frankie and I both have taught at this summer theater program, the National High School Institute at Northwestern University, colloquially referred to as the Cherubs program. And how many summers did we teach there together?
3, and then 1 virtual pandemic summer. Could that be right?
Yeah, that could be right.
I feel like when people are referring to the version of whatever that they did during 2020, there's always this, I see some people want to say that's like a half of something, but I'm like, no, that's more of something. That required more labor than doing it normally, probably.
Absolutely. There is no question. Trying to get a bunch of students across the country and really across the globe, like galvanized behind, excited to like roll around on the floor and whimper for a little bit. It's like, that's what theater students do. Aren't you excited? And then you're like, no, my grandma's over there, like my little sibling is jumping on the bunk bed next to me. It was,
yeah. More credit is deserved for that.
Yes.
So, since this is a music-based podcast, I think our listeners might want to know, Frankie, what album hath thou brought before this one goes to 11 tribunal?
I am eagerly delivering unto the tribunal the album Evolve by Ani DiFranco.
Ani.
Awesome.
Yes.
You have not disappointed. I am so glad you are bringing her to the pod.
Yes, she's a deserving appearance on this podcast for sure.
I concur.
Not the album I would have thought, but we'll dive into that. Yeah.
Not the album you would have thought.
Yeah, but so this will be this will be a good conversation, I think.
Well, someone else will just have to bring her other deserving albums.
She's got a few. She's got just
there.
Yeah, she's got a few more we can cover.
Yeah.
This is fun when people choose an off the wall option for. We've had a few of those where it's maybe a popular artist but not their most popular album, so that it gives you and it is about winning. Frankie, I don't know if you knew that this is about, you do have to win this. So I will be keeping score as we go along, and I'll let you know about the points you get as we go.
And choosing a not maybe highest profile album, that gives me more points, I assume.
I'm not going to say it.
We're going here? Okay.
Maybe. But we do have an opportunity. We have this fun segment called The Beginner's Guide to Evolve by Ani DiFranco in 60 seconds that we do for our listeners in case they don't know Ani or this, they don't know the artist or the album that we're speaking about. One of us, and today it's Michael, will do a 60-second recap. And then once that is done, you will get a chance to rate Michael on the job that he did, summarizing Ani, the person, and Evolve, the album. Michael, are you ready to do that? I have a minute on the clock.
I'm ready. I gave myself a personal challenge on this one, and I'll share with you that challenge afterwards. But I think, Frankie, you might pick up on what I've challenged myself to do very quickly in this, but we'll see.
I can't wait.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, then, buckle your seatbelts, everybody. A minute is on the clock. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, and go.
Sorry I am if you don't know the righteous babe from Buffalo, Ani DiFranco. Wish I may inform you she is more than just an ironic Dusty Springfield cover at the start of my best friend's wedding. She is worthy of your attention. She is shameless about her advocacy for reproductive rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and other progressive causes. Inspired by poet Sekou Sundiata and folk singer Pete Seeger, her lyrics are clever and incisive, and her staccato guitar picking style has a bit of gravel to it. Her music is 32 flavors and then some, blending a bit of folk, a bit of funk, a bit of jazz, a bit of punk. Going back, she started her own record company at just 19, and a year later released her debut album featuring her most iconic track, Both Hands. 20 solo albums and 2 Prince collaborations later, she is still a superhero, releasing Revolutionary Love just last year. Her 12th album, 2003's Evolve, is a perfect example of her blending of styles and her willingness to experiment, and it won her first and only Grammy for Best Recording Package. So who is Ani DiFranco? She's no fucking Napoleon. She is a light of some kind.
I am dead. I am. You landed 32 flavors at 32 seconds, and you landed 12th studio album at 12 seconds, and I am just bowing down to you. Oh my God.
That was unintentional. That was not the challenge I gave myself, though. But I did manage to 10 song titles I snuck in there. So,
and you remembered her completely uncharacteristic feature in my best friend's wedding. I can't.
Yeah.
What more could I possibly ask for?
So bizarre, right? So what? How do you rate my recap?
In any terms you see fit.
Whatever scale you want.
Numbers, letters, colors, shapes.
If I'm completely honest, I probably would have taken a less cute approach were I to do it. Mm-hmm. But I respect the hell out of it, Osinski's. That's a 10 out of 10. That's a 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
All right, thank you.
Okay, love it.
There are infinite ways to go about any creative endeavor, you know. Mm-hmm. And so just because that's not how I would have sworn more. I
You'll have your opportunity. We're all ready to label this episode explicit content, so it's fine.
It's already on there, yeah.
Well, Frankie, before we dive into the album, let's jump back a bit. And sorry, I had to do it again. And could you tell us a bit about your relationship with music overall?
I grew up really musical. Singing, I played trumpet growing up, which I think is one of the reasons. Too. Ah, nice. Yeah. Did you ever have braces?
I did indeed.
I quit when the braces showed up.
It made it not fun.
Awful.
I do not begrudge you that.
Yeah. So growing up, I sang, I played trumpet, I played the piano, and I was a musical theater kid, and I still am kind of a musical, I'll own it. I'm just going to take it. I'm a musical theater kid still.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think music was often a way it was a tool for kind of sense making, whether that was like the lyrics that I was listening to, like a lot of Ani DiFranco's, poetics really made things line up for me, but also just like rocking through Canon in D by Paco Bell, like over and over on the piano to get my feelings out, I think music was, it was a salve in a lot of ways growing up. And I think it still is, although I don't know, as an adult, I go through phases where I don't listen so much. And then I'm like, I have iTunes and Spotify and all these tools for like helping me, that salve is there. You just got to remember to like tap the screen.
I find that with reading too, with reading, I'm like, I'll go through periods where I don't read as much for whatever reason, probably my phone, if we're completely honest, is that will suck so much of your time up. But then once you come back to reading and you get into a groove where you're really reading something or a couple books, and that salve has been there all along and you just kind of forgot about it.
Absolutely. I actually just got, so I'm recording this in my local public library, and I do this thing where I get a bunch of books out of the library and I read like a third of one of them, and then they're overdue and I renew them. I play this game with myself but I recently made a promise that like before they're due back, one of these books will be done. There are 4 books.
I like that tactic.
I just need to finish one of them,
Yeah.
So I do think it's a similar thing.
Do you feel like you still have to get physical books? Because I've signed up through the Free Library of Philadelphia, and I get digital versions to my Kindle, and it's just I do it, but I feel like I'm doing something. I feel not something dirty, just something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would never. I can't imagine, it sounds so stupid, but I can't imagine not flipping pages or doing that thing where you like put your finger where you currently are and see how many pages are left before the chapter is done, and like, well, I'm going to wait to pee until, it's only 6 pages. I can make it.
Right.
I don't think I could do a Kindle or a device.
I think there are particular kind of books that lend themselves to being read on a Kindle or an e-reader of some kind. I definitely couldn't read them on my phone. That would just be, that feels awful. Oh no judgment on anyone who does, I guess. At least, reading is happening, but man, it makes me feel so shrunken, I guess.
Yeah. I teach movement for actors a lot of the time, and I always talk about like the way you end up hunched over your little, plastic box that you're tapping feverishly. And then you sort of remind yourself, once that's out of the way, like, oh my God, I take up so much more space, right? Yeah. I'm not the shrunken little shell of myself that my phone turns me into. So yeah, gotta have pages.
Absolutely.
We're getting back to music. Were there particular artists that you listened to growing up that you grew attached to even before we get to Ani, or was Ani one of the first?
She was kind of one of the first, but yeah, I'd say a lot of music came to me through my older sister, Danny. She's 6 years older than I am. She's a musician. Her musician name is Kiyosi. So anyone listening, go check out Kiyosi. Kyosi. But yeah, so I will get to this in more detail, but I just used to raid her room, and I don't know, maybe like 7 years old, finding a Radiohead cassette and being like, well, let's see what this is about. And having no idea what was happening, of course, but I'd say Radiohead was pretty important. Jazz was also just like jazz standards. That was a lot of my childhood, was listening to her sing jazz and then sort of turning around and singing it myself. Musicals, I'd say, like kind of golden age, Oklahoma and Guys and Dolls. Dave Matthews Band was kind of like a big part of my. It's not anymore, but that featured pretty prominently.
I'm kind of there too. I was just thinking about this. I think Dave Matthews Band is the band I've seen most live. I think I've seen Dave Matthews Band 4 or 5 times live.
No way! All right,
Yeah.
Cool.
And nowadays I'm like, I don't know if I like them. They're fine, they're fine for what they are. But I don't know if I'd go to another one.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Bare Naked Ladies had a similar vibe. And
Yeah.
It's not. I don't need them so much these days. I've released them, but I'm grateful for the space they occupied. Oh, Eva Cassidy. Eva Cassidy was huge when I was maybe like 11 or 12. Songbird, her album Songbird, really. Her ability to sing without force, right? To really like just walk up to the edge of pushing. Yeah, just really a nuanced. My mom just brought her up to me recently and we were talking about this, just like her ability to really touch a note and, it's in the pocket. She's got it. It's clear. It's beautiful, but not sort of flourish in the way that she might. I'm not like that when I sing.
Nor I. I'm just like, oh, please get that note out, please, God.
I value the understated, but I'm a maximalist.
Well, so then was it I guess it sounds like we're kind of already leading into there. How did you discover Ani DiFranco, and in particular this album, whether this was the first one that you discovered or if this was a later discovery?
Yeah, so this was not the first one, but the first album of hers that I listened to was Little Plastic Castle, which I also considered nominating, which maybe would have been when someone familiar with Ani DiFranco would have expected to get nominated for this podcast.
Perhaps.
But yeah, so I, like I said, was rifling through my older sister's stuff, and not just her music. It's like a little queer kid who didn't have language, didn't understand anything. Something just always like brought me to Danny's closet. Like, ooh, you just try on this sweater really quick. Ooh, like behind a closed door. And I also checked out her tunes a lot. And she had a really eclectic, she still does. She's very much a musician's musician. And I found this, like, I think it was a CD, maybe it was a cassette. I don't know, but like I remember like a cracked jewel case and popping it in, and this sort of sonic onslaught that is the opening track of Little Plastic Castle. I'd never heard anything like it before. And I certainly didn't have any way of making sense of the lyrics. I did, but it was just something felt sort of, it was not familiar, but it was comfortable. It was not anything I'd heard before, but it was something I wanted to hear more of. So yeah, I don't know how old I would have been then. I was maybe like around 11. And so Little Plastic Castle was my first entree to Ani land. Then this album, Evolve, came a lot later. So I was 14 when I got the CD of Evolve for my birthday, which was a year after it came out. I think it was a 2003 release. And it was a good album to have in hand because, like you said, Osinski, it won the like packaging Grammy, which...
I didn't know that existed, by the way.
Exactly, like such a bizarre thing. But it was this beautiful, it had the sleeve and you pulled it out and there were all these folding elements and it was just like really... I'm sure somewhere in like my mother's basement it's still around. I would love to go back and find that album art and the whole, back to having a book with pages, right? The like tactile experience of opening the case.
So you mentioned the sonic onslaught of the first track to the earlier album. What else was it about Ani's music that drew you in? Was it and especially with this album, which I think is particular in her body of work, what was it that really made you feel like it was in the pocket of wanting to know more, but not having heard anything? I love the way you said that, and the way that you said it felt not familiar, but comfortable.
Yeah. I think there were a few things. She uses her voice as an instrument. The timbre of her voice goes everywhere. It gets thin and scratchy, and then it gets brassy and honking, and she's not afraid of it, and I think as a young person who was always being told, lift your soft palate and, breathe to your diaphragm and all this, technical stuff, like to hear someone who was just really embodying the tune and fully stretching in all different directions her instrument, both her physical instrument, her voice, and also her guitar. I mean, she's like tapping and strumming and bong, like really plucking. The horns. I love a good horn on a track, as a former trumpet player. So there's something about the music that really was just like, what is happening here? And it's that thing when someone is, I think it is embodiment, when someone is just like really present with the task at hand, you sort of lean into them in a way. So that was part of it. And then the lyrics, like I didn't understand them, but I knew that I'm trying to think of some of the like overtly queer lyrics, there's a song on Little Plastic Castle called Two Little Girls. And it's, it's like the whole album is about these young women in a relationship, or maybe not the whole album, but it recurs. And it's about sort of the expectation of I should be a certain way, in her world, there was an expectation to perform being a young woman in a certain way. And here I am showing up with my shaved head and holding my lover's hand, who also was a young woman, and F your expectations. I think that, like, as a kid who felt very boxed in so many different ways, was like, oh, I want to listen to a little more of this,
Yeah.
I think A Little Plastic Castle, I think, was the first time that she started. I might be wrong on this because, I mean, as I said, she's released a gajillion albums, but like I feel like Little Plastic Castle is when she started to really bring in the horns. I mean, because then, I mean, my absolute favorite Ani DiFranco album is actually To the Teeth, which probably feels like a weird album to be a favorite, I think. But I mean, I think Maceo Parker plays on that. That's one of the albums that Prince collaborated with her on a song, and it's just horns all over the place on that album.
And that album is so, like one of the things about being a person who's followed Ani DiFranco for a couple of decades now, and who's gotten familiar with her catalog, which you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like really overwhelming because she's so productive. She's constantly generating new material. But one of the things that you see is just how prescient she is and how much she knows. She's got her finger to the pulse of something. And To the Teeth, like the title comes from that song. The sun is setting on the century and we are armed to the teeth. Like it's just, and here we are, we haven't really moved past it. And who else was really singing about gun violence and our country being super saturated with firearms, right? And naming their album after that.
Yeah.
Well, what's beautiful is to see how she is both sort of embodying it for this particular period of time that she's in. And maybe you could say this for many great artists, but like also carrying on in the tradition. Like she's so tied to these people who she held as heroes, like the Woody Guthries and the Pete Seegers and all that. So to see the direct connection and to be honest, collaboration that she does with that is pretty inspiring, and it makes it all the more impressive the way that she's playing that role now, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Do you think it was, for you discovering this as a young person, was it that it put voice to feelings and values that you felt like you already had, or that it enlightened you to a worldview that you didn't know existed before and was introducing you to something different? Does that make sense? And maybe it's a bit of both.
It does make really good sense. I don't know that it's a bit of both. I think that I had no idea this world existed. I think maybe I felt that there was, something beyond my like suburban Rochester, New York experiences in my divorced parents and my sort of, good deal of like hyper masculinity in my Italian American family, all these forces that really were like kind of oppressive as a kid. I don't know that I saw past all of that. And she helped me, she really she's also from upstate New York. She's from Buffalo. Father was Italian. Her parents split. Like we had a lot of crossover. And I think in listening to her, there were moments of like, oh, that is something I do know. And then, oh, that's something I've never considered in my wildest dreams, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she really opened a lot of windows for me to peek out of as a young person.
Ooh, windows. I like the windows. Your points are piling up, Frankie. And also, I just I just realized the DiCiaccio DiFranco parallel. I didn't even think about that before.
We are basically the same person.
Have you seen her play live?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How many times?
I don't know how many times. I'd say maybe like four,
Okay.
probably not five, probably four. In Rochester, in Chicago, at the Vic Theater in Chicago.
Good venue.
It's a great venue. My now husband, we weren't married yet, and he got me 4 tickets as a present to go see her. And it was really kind. And I was like, who are the tickets for? And he was like, well, I don't know, like your other friends who like her. And I was like, I don't know anybody who likes her. So he came, and a couple of our mutual friends came, you know, none of whom were like big Ani stans. And I was just losing my shit the whole time. And it was great. It was, you know.
Oh, what a gift you gave them, though. You introduced them to something that they I hope they fell in love with her. I mean, it'd be hard not to.
Yeah, I think that they, at the least, felt a similar thing that I'm describing about when I first started listening to her, which was like, damn, what is this? This is, you know, this is different. This isn't what I thought I was walking into. And then I saw her once at Bonnaroo. I dragged a friend that was like another, you know, there are a million stages at Bonnaroo and a lot of artists. So I was the only diehard Ani fan in that group. And I think my friend Alex came to see her with me. And then the trade-off was that we had to go see someone. I don't remember who it was. You know, I was going to go with him right after she ended. And a few weeks later, I saw a video of her giving an interview, like right where we had been standing. Like, Alex, how could you?
And we went over to see Skrillex or something. You know?
I was trying to think of what would be the exact opposite of Ani DiFranco and I think Skrillex was pretty close. Yeah,
maybe I did it. Maybe I found the opposite.
I'm trying to think who else was. I think Snoop was playing that summer, so it might have been.
Surprisingly, I wouldn't find Snoop to be the opposite of Ani DiFranco.
Not a polar opposite, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
One of the things I was just going to say when Basinski, you said that they're not polar opposites, is that I think that they both operate with a really high level of transparency. They're not. They don't use like a whole ton of artifice. They're not like obfuscating. You know, there's some artists like, this is my persona and I want to leave it on the stage and go home. And I don't really get that from either of them. I think they're very much themselves, you know, when they step on stage and when they go home and light a blunt, whatever, you know, like they both sing about doing.
Go hang out with Martha Stewart. I could see both of them hanging out with Martha Stewart, right? They probably.
Oh, I don't know. Ani would be like trashing all of Martha's expensive things.
I think, I mean, Martha feels very like, you know, and I have embraced capitalist culture. I am like, she is consumerism.
Went to jail for insider trading.
I mean, there you go.
God.
Yeah, I do feel like, I think maybe it was something that is sort of attractive to people about Ani DiFranco is that there's an authenticity. You just feel like she's not screwing around. Like she's singing about what she feels and what she believes. And while there's an artistry to it, there's also a directness to it. Somehow, like, that's actually a really impressive thing that she does. I think a lot of artists, they sort of couch everything in, I don't know, like in a poetic imagery, or there's some sort of like puzzle or something you kind of like sift through. You gotta really interpret and figure out, or they're blunt. And she somehow manages to be both at the same time, and I don't know how how that happens.
Then that's another thing that when I first started listening to her, like there would be a stanza of complete impenetrable imagery for me, and I'd be like, I don't know what this is about, and then like a reference to her abortion, right? Like really bluntly talking about the importance of reproductive health, and then back into this lush, sort of layered metaphor and imagery. I completely agree with Basinski. It does feel really authentic too. And I haven't really nerded out on interviews with her too much. I did read her book, No Walls and The Recurring Dream.
Hmm.
But in the book, and then also in some of the interviews I've seen her in, it feels like she's that way in life too, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we could never really know.
Right.
Maybe she actually has like a lot of stock in Apple.
No way. But that's the thing. She's been doing it this way since she was 19 as well. So there's a little bit of the fact that you've been doing it. It's not different. You're not trying to present us with this image of yourself as an artist that's any different than what you always have since you were quite literally a child. You know, that the longevity of it, I think, speaks to her moral fiber, if you will.
Yeah. And one of the things, so I did, I guess kind of in preparation for this, I did read an interview she did with The Guardian, I think in like 2018 or something. And she talks about making mistakes and publicly, you know, she's constantly critiqued. I think that she envisions a world that is very in line with a lot of other, you know, progressive activists and leaders, but she doesn't just regurgitate talking points. I don't think she'd be comfortable, you know, she doesn't do it. So my guess is that she doesn't do it because she's not comfortable or it doesn't feel like that authenticity is there. But she's made mistakes. And I think that one of the things that I guess I kind of respect that she's not afraid to make mistakes. In this interview, she talks about like young people, like artists trying to establish themselves now in the social media era and how like she feels for them. If you put out something and everyone just piles on it, it takes a lot of fortitude and perseverance and you know, self-assurance to keep going in that direction. And there's no way that when Blood in the Boardroom came out on Puddle Dive and she sings about getting her period and leaving a stain on the chair in the boardroom of a record label, like she would get some pile on for that, you know, if that, like, I can only imagine that, what was that, like the late 90s, I think late 90s that album came out, she would have, you know, imagine what kind of pushback she would have.
Oh yeah, definitely. What about this particular album, though? I think we've been covering a lot about, you know, about her as an artist overall, and actually maybe at this point it might be a good time to introduce to our listeners your standout track for this album and tell them why you chose it.
The standout track that I chose, and there were a few that I was considering, is the very first song on the album, Promised Land. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about like maybe sort of how the album hit me when I first encountered it. So the context is that I was 14 and a lot of crazy stuff happened in my 14th year. Going into high school, my grandfather, with whom I was really close, passed away. My dad and stepmom got married. My sister studied abroad in Ghana, so she moved to Accra. All sorts of big changes. And, you know, going into high school also, like that's not a particularly easy change to navigate.
For anyone, no matter the circumstances.
It isn't.
My brother's best friend who was 19 died in a car accident. You know, they were like, so on top of, for anyone, the high school challenge, it was pretty bleak there for a little bit, you know? And so there's one of the songs, I think it might be Second Intermission. She talks about like popping the zits of her self-loathing under fluorescent lights. And, you know, what like pimply 14-year-old isn't so insecure and, you know, so there's just all sorts of, in a lot of ways, I felt that this album kind of came into my life when I needed it or something. And it's, I don't know this, but I get a lot of sense of Severance in her lyrics on this one. A lot of like endings, a lot of, we had a good run. I think this came out like a couple years after she left her first spouse. And while I wasn't, you know, divorcing my grandfather, there was the end of a relationship there, you know, and so something about it hit a lot of the experiences that I was having. This very like complex, gnarled experience bubble, or not even bubble, like a tumbleweed that I couldn't slow down and kind of look at and parse and figure out. And somehow here was this person I'd never met, just like explaining it all to me.
I mean, the beauty of a severance being that there is something like, you know, it being a boundary between two things, I think is pretty cool. And for somebody who, as an artist, it feels like she lives in this gray area, this like, you know, you're not in the corporate infrastructure. You're not like but you're still participating in those things. You're still like a high profile touring artist. So you're by definition being involved in those things. Like somebody that can teach you how to live in the gray is always going to be a gift, particularly at that stage of your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when this song in particular, I don't really know the context of it, like this is one of the more poetic pieces of her writing. It maybe not quite so blunt, but the line, "Your chest is an empty shell with ribs of spiraling coral where a perfect pearl of sadness resides. And if you ever need an ear, I can just come and press it there and listen to the sound of the ocean inside." Like depressed, out of their mind 14-year-old Frankie was like, "Thank you, please come listen to my choral, my vacant, and yet the music is this like sultry, like kind of sexy, it's like it just doesn't it's expansive. It's not what you expect. It's not a depressing song. It speaks to depressed people maybe, but it's not a depressing song. And there's that surprise. There's she kind of what I was saying about how she doesn't want to just like regurgitate talking points. I think she's not satisfied. Like you can't find like a 1-3-5 chord progression in her work, like the well-worn. She's innovating constantly. And what that results in is this like really lush kind of motley combination of different textures. And so the lyrics are sad and speak to sadness, and the music is just like swirling and sort of envelops you and makes you feel really kind of, I don't know, at ease. It's just there's like an alchemy to it or something.
Yes,
I like that.
Yeah,
word,
and there's alchemy's right. Alchemical indeed. It has to be. So I think it'd be a great time for us to go back over the points that you have accrued thus far. And before we take a listen to the song together, I gave you 750 points for the tumbleweed of circumstance and life events that you were describing right there, because we all need good music when we're riding that tumbleweed. I gave you 150 points for I don't know anybody who likes her when your future husband got you those tickets to the show. You don't need to have friends who like the same music as you necessarily. 200 points for Ani giving you windows to peek out of. That's a beautiful image. I gave you 300 points for rifling through your sister Danny's closet, and then I gave you 250 points for Kiyoshi. That's who the listeners need to look up. Okay. Yeah. The 250 points for Kiyoshi. Go listen to Kiyoshi's music. 300 points for being at a public library right now, my favorite public institution. And 600 points for using Canon and D as therapy in your younger years. So you're doing great so far. You're doing great.
I'd like to add a bonus 175 points for being the first one to drop Radiohead in the episode before either Tyler or I even mentioned the band.
Yeah. Duly given.
Because, dear listeners, it's not always just me and Tyler who like Radiohead, all right? So back
Believe it or not. It might seem that way.
All right. Well, why don't we give a listen to Promised Land?
Let's do it.
That's the end of part 1. If you access this episode via our YouTube playlist, you're about to hear our guest's standout track. If you'd like to jump ahead to part 2, you'll find a link in the description of this episode.